There you go.
Hello.
Welcome to what? Buyer beware used boats.
Yes.
Welcome to our world headquarters here for You're Going to Need a Bigger Boat, or as we like to call it, our kitchen.
Our kitchen.
See, I see. All right.
Our kitchen.
Let's see. A little backdrop. What you got there?
Yeah, why don't you start with your sailing history?
Sailing history.
Your first boat.
Maritime history, or
the first boat.
First
you
boat. First boat. I got my first boat for my birthday when I was in kindergarten. Still have it. Little 12-foot aluminum, old rental boat from a cottage out on the lake that folks got for like $100. Still have it. Got my first outboard when I was, I think, 11 from my uncle with a stripped out gear set in it. Tried to use it. Got my first real outboard that I paid for from lawn mowing money when I was 12. In 1946, Evernude Zephyr, 4-cylinder, 5.5 horse, pistons about the size of a quarter. It's in the basement. I still have it. So I grew up on a lake, grew up water skiing, but I grew up on boats. My folks had boats. My grandmother had boats. When I turned 18 years old, I went in the Merchant Marine, started sailing on the Great Lakes freighters. That starting at the bottom of the totem pole with in the shipping industry didn't get you on the newest and nicest boats. So the first several years that I sailed were on really old boats. You can look up some of them. I was on the Crapo. I was on the old Ernest D. Breach, which ended up being the Kinsman Independent later when Steinbrenner had it, and I worked for them. I worked on the Medusa Challenger when it was the Medusa Challenger, and then when they renamed it. Just a lot of old boats. Worked on the Bobla boats one summer. Actually, one of the few people probably left around, this kind of ages me, but I've done time on more than one up and down steam engine. And so when I speak about boats, I've been around boating in every sense of the boating. I've worked in the engine room, I've worked in the pilot house, I've worked on deck, I've worked on my own boats to keep them going. So I got a little bit of background here. By no means am I the expert on any of this. It's more like I've seen a little bit of everything. So that would be my background. And my wife's background with boating, well, she married me.
There's no background in boating. I went fishing a few times with my dad when I was little. That's about the extent.
Right.
Boating for me started when we bought our Owens. And I went from no boating experience to learning how to take care of a 30-foot wood boat. That was a learning curve. And it just kind of went from there.
Which you will see more of. You'll see some of that wood boat on this channel. It looks like we're putting it in the summer. So, it's in case this video actually is out there for a while, this is the summer of 2021, post-COVID. The boat doesn't seem to have COVID, so we might put that in the water. Everything else seems to. On that note, let's get right into it. So where do we go from? We have notes because this is going to be a little lengthy. This is not a short YouTube video. This is kind of going to be some stories, and just, you don't need to have $1 million to have a boat. You don't need to run down to the local boat dealer and spend $50,000 to have a boat. We'll get into that. We got some notes over there. Well, let's go right into our boats. The most expensive boat that we have bought to date was a Chris Craft Stinger 1987 260
Yeah.
for $6,500. You don't need to go out and break the bank for a boat if you know what you're looking for and you take your time. That boat has its own story.
Yeah.
But this video and this channel, I mean, yeah, if you got $1 million in a boat and enjoy watching, please like and subscribe and watch. But this channel's for everybody else that might be able to scrape together $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 for a boat. And that's what this video is about. Not getting taken. Not because every boat that we've had that we have, we've saved for, and
Spend a lot of time looking and putting feelers out and kind of really knowing the boat before we talk to the people, and then after inspecting the boat, confirming or denying our suspicions about the boat, and kind of going from there.
Right. And we've seen a lot of people just run out and buy boats over the years, and
sometimes it doesn't always work out very well, and you watch them and it's painful to see it take a turn for the worst.
And everybody's boating dream, for the most part, is we're going to have a good time on a boat. We're going to have smiles. We're going to have fun. And nobody sits there and looks at that boat or thinks about that boat that they want and thinks, it's going to be at the boat mechanic's place. They're going to want $1,200 repair on a boat that I paid $2,000 for. Or maybe I paid $1,500 for the boat and they want $2,500 to fix the boat. And this is kind of a little bit to avoid stuff like that. Where do we go from here? Where are we at on your?
Well,
we can check off the
kind
heading.
of go into how we ended up with a 22 and how our 22
Okay, yeah.
was supposed to be the 26, and we ended up with the 22.
So we wanted a bigger speedboat. We had the old wood boat, and we wanted to move into an 80s style speedboat.
We wanted something that was going to fit all of us, though, comfortably, that we wouldn't outgrow.
Right. And 3 kids, 2 adults, had to seat 5. And something that wouldn't break the bank. And so I'd been shopping around, and Chris Craft Stingers from the 80s seemed to really have the bang for the buck. And we could debate how well they're made or how well they aren't made. I would say that breaks down to the model. I have a 222 and I have a 260. The 260 is everything the 222 is never going to be. The 260 is heavy, super deep V, cuts through the waves, runs great. The 222, light, bounces off the waves, but goes faster.
It looks impressive.
Right.
When it's
you
going
can see
through the
video.
waves.
You can see some video on the channel in the playlist. That being said, how we ended up with a 222. We were going to buy a 260 with twin 350s and twin alphas. Because from an economic standpoint, alpha stern drives are cheap. Cheaper than Bravos, cheap to maintain, cheap to replace. Now with SEI out of Florida, you can get a replacement brand new Alpha drive with a 3-year warranty for $1,400. So it almost makes working on an Alpha a moot point. Why would you put money, $1,000 into rebuilding an Alpha or $500 worth of parts into an upper gear set when you can buy an upper gear set brand new with warranty for a couple $100 more? So we were leaning towards the Alpha and the small blocks. I mean, the time-tested combination, Chevy small block and an Alpha drive, probably the most popular setup in any application. The 260 had 2 of them. So we like to go offshore. We like to go up to the islands in the summer. We do some long distance boating. Twin engines is a plus. I mean, if one engine breaks, one engine gets you home. So we set up the deal, and it was a go on a boat in Detroit for $5,000. And the last phone call I had with the guy was, listen, I'm going to get the money out of the bank. The wife will come down Monday with my dad, and they're going to meet you and pick up the boat and trailer the boat home. Monday rolls around.
Yeah, I had all the money and everything. I was getting ready to pull out, and I texted him and I says, "Hey, I'm leaving now. I'll be there in so many hours." And he texted me back and said, "Sorry, I sold the boat." Kind of like your typical Craigslist out from under you deal.
So, being the fine connoisseurs of old junk off of Craigslist that we are,
miraculously, it wasn't the only boat that we had spied, and we're like, "Hey, that one looks good too."
Right. There was a backup boat, hence the 222 that we have.
Yeah.
And the short story is, I was working out on the freighter, and it was fall. And they were purchasing the boat, and then the boat fell through, and I wasn't getting off the boat for another week.
Right.
So I got home after that all fell through, and I called on this other boat that I'd been watching. And we went down to see it first week of November. November, great time to buy boats. October, excellent time to buy boats. I don't even have to explain, you can figure that out. That time of year, great time to buy boats.
Yeah.
So we go down to Kalamazoo and look at the red boat. And it's cold, it's raining. And we look it all over, and we talk to the owner. And the deal I made with the owner was, listen, you want I think it was $5,500.
Yeah.
I says, you don't want to put this boat in the water. I don't want to put this boat in the water. And then re-winterize it and everything. I'll tell you what I'll do. I will take it.
Well, not to mention, I do believe it was dark. It seems like we do a lot of stuff in the dark. It was after the sun had set.
Yes. So all I told him is, I will take you at your word that I'm getting a good boat. I'm not even going to run it.
No.
He seemed really honest. He had put a lot of work into the boat. He had repainted the boat. I mean, if you are making a deal on a boat and any part of you doesn't feel, I don't know, or that hair stands up or whatever it is, walk away. I felt good. I as we drove away with that boat, I said, either we're making out or this guy really got one over on us. But I feel that we got a good boat.
Yeah.
And that boat, fast forward to 8 months later in the spring, or 9 months, whatever it was, because we didn't get it out till I think it was June.
Yeah.
That boat, we turned on the battery switch, put the earmuffs on it, and it started.
Right over, yeah.
It pumped the throttle and it started. It fired right up. And the antifreeze shot out the exhaust, and that was that. And we used that boat. And we've done very little work to it. In 6 years, I think we've had that boat now.
It's got to be close, yeah.
And changed the oil. Did a service on the stern drive because the bellows was getting dry rotted. And I just didn't want to have a problem, because we do run out on the open lake, and when you're running, from Ludington up to Frankfurt or something, the last thing you want is, when you're 4 miles offshore, the boat to quit, right? Something to break. I've had it happen. Took off for North Manitou Island with an old Thompson boat that I had back in the day, and the gimbal bearing went out. And we knew the gimbal bearing was bad, but we pumped it full of grease and thought, it'll be okay. And it was okay all the way out to the island. And then on the way back over to shore to go get a pizza about 2 miles offshore, the gimbal bearing let go. It stacked in the reese, and it blew the transom housing apart. And it ripped the bellows. And now I'm sitting 2 miles offshore with a blowed out gimbal bearing and a boat that's sinking slowly, and a bilge pump not quite keeping up. And not the only time I've almost sunk a boat. I promise you, the worst feeling in the world is more water coming in than is going out a bilge pump.
Yeah.
Usually, this involves some kind of wood boat story, not a fiberglass story.
There's one of those too, though.
Or a couple of them.
A couple of them.
One going across Saginaw Bay with a dirty bilge. Literally less than 20 hours after the wood boat hit the water, not completely swallowed shut, and paint chips sloshing through the bilge from the old paint coming off, plugging up a pump, and having to stop at night by myself on a 30-foot Owens in the middle of Saginaw Bay in 4-foot waves and just go down because the water's up to the cabin floor and clean the bilge pump out. Not a good feeling. Not a good feeling at all. So let's not get too far off that. So that's how, one fell through, back up. You can find a good boat. That boat's been a great boat. $4,000 into that boat, 6 years. I mean, that's less than $1,000 a year to own it. And I'm going to say it's still less than $1,000 a year to own it, even after we put the gimbal and the bellows and all the stuff on it. Still under $1,000 a year to own that boat. And it has just brung us a lot of fun. So now let's go to the opposite side of that, the 260. We went to Chicago twice for this 260. And a shout out to my buddy Han, who runs the Chris Craft Stingers website. I wouldn't have the boat if it wasn't for him. He had seen the boat, recognized the boat, got me in touch with the guy that owned it. So we go down to Chicago to look at this boat. And the guy that we're buying the boat from, it's the best boat ever.
There's nothing wrong with this boat. It runs great. It's fantastic. It's the best boat in the world.
Matter of fact, it ran so good. Now, for those of you who have been around boats and aren't new to this, you might appreciate this. Our 260 is one of only 4 260s that were ever built with a single big block. Almost every single Chris Craft 260 comes with twin 350s. But they built 4 of them, whether they were special order or whatever. They built 4 that were 454 alpha combinations. This is one of the 4. I specifically wanted this boat not for performance. I wanted it because when you go down in the engine compartment of this boat, we can sit on each side of the engine in the compartment and have lunch on top of the engine. Mm-hmm. And I'm not Owen's age. So when I got to crawl down there and work on it, this is a boat that I can get down in and physically just sit down beside the engine and work on anything there. It's all open. It's all, it's a big, beautiful, open engine compartment with tons of room. It's supposed to be 2 engines down there. So that being said, the owner of this boat reassured us this was a 60 or 70 mile an hour boat.
In reality, though, he just kept reassuring us that there was some problems. And every time he'd open his mouth, I'd just look at John and go, I don't think we should buy the boat. I'd be like, or we shouldn't pay what he's asking. That was the big thing, was I just kept telling him it's not worth what he's asking.
And we drove out of there the first night. We drove out of there the first night and just went, I mean, we talked about it. We looked the boat over really good. And we talked about the boat and what was there. And at the end of the day, what we kind of figured was the hull, the dash, the boat was original.
Right.
I mean, nobody ever went as far as to even cut a hole in the dash to add anything. The dash was just the way it came from the factory the day it left. The still had the original stereo in it that it came with. I mean,
The cabin wasn't touched. It was all the original cabin, all the original cushions. They were clean. It was the interior was good. Everything, the cockpit cushions and everything were clean. They had
well, the only thing that had been redone
right.
was the two cushions over the engine compartment and the back seat cushion and stuff. And that was it. That was the only thing that, and you can't fault it for that. I mean, you know, if you're around old boats, material dries out
Yeah.
and cracks. But other than that, everything was original. And then it was sitting on a 2005
Yep.
all aluminum double axle instigator trailer. And that trailer was about probably $6,000 brand new. So you're looking at the trailer's like brand new. The hull is in good shape. The dash, everything that you'd want is unmolested in the boat. But we knew, we just knew that boat wasn't gonna start up and
Go.
across the water. You knew. But so when we bought that boat, we went back down there, and we didn't want to pay more. He wanted 7, 8. Well, no, originally
He wanted 65.
well, no, he had it listed for the last listing was 9,500.
Right, and he said
Then he
it's
came down
low.
to 7,500.
Right. And I kept telling John, I says, I wouldn't pay more than 5 or 4,500. I'm like, 4,500, 5,000. I'm like, that's what it's worth to me, you know. And he kept telling me, you know, the trailer's worth this much and the boat's worth that much. But we
were on the same page. We were on the same page.
It wasn't worth the 9.
This was a $5,000 boat. This was a $5,000 boat. But we ended up at 6,500. And so how we ended up there was, well, the trailer, the hull. If we had to put a motor in it, we'd know what we had.
Right.
Is the hull, the trailer, the dash, the component? Is there? Well, we were thinking 5, but is there $5,000 worth of boat here? And at the end of the day, yes, there definitely was $5,000 worth of boat there. So how did we end up with it for 6,500? Are you gonna let $1,500 stand between you and your dream? That was how we ended up with the boat. Was at the end of the day, I knew I wanted a 260. I knew from talking to Han, there was only 4 of these boats. We ended up at 6,500. We gave him 6,500. But we drove away at midnight in Chicago with that boat. Because if you ever got to get a boat in and out of Chicago, Detroit, anything, talk to them, do it in the middle of the night. It's when traffic's the lightest, it's your best possibility for success. So we literally hit the road at about 12:30 at night with that boat and came back, got it up here, took a nap, and the next day went out there, and
it wasn't the red boat.
It wasn't, but
it did fire.
It started right up.
Fire.
It started. I couldn't make this up if I tried. That boat, we put the earmuffs on it and put the water to it, and I went up there and hit that key, and that thing didn't roll over 10 seconds and was running. It just fired, boom, and it is running.
Yep.
And not another 10 seconds, it's just flooding out. And it just floods right out till it dies. So I get back there, I pull the flame arrestor off there, and I'm like, okay. And I'm looking for fuel coming up, the tattletale hose from the fuel pump, just dumping raw fuel in there. I'm looking for stuck floats, stuck choke. Oh, check it out. No stuck choke. No fuel coming up from the pump. No ripped diaphragm. No stuck floats. But it's flooding out. I mean, this thing is just flooding out. Anything under quarter throttle, it just the exhaust turns black and it floods out.